A real estate agent says that landlords should never give discounts to tenants on the rent. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of Australia. Now, normally I don't talk about Australia, even though I read a lot of articles out of there, right? And right now, the landlords in Australia are getting a ton of heat because the housing market there is hot. It's hotter than it is here in the US, at least, right? And so housing costs are extremely high, and people are, they're taking aim at the landlords. They're blaming the landlords for the situation, just like they do here. And they're saying, hey, the reason that rents are higher because the landlords are greedy. The landlords are just, they're chilling on the beach, drinking martinis, etc. No, that's just not the case, okay? The reason that housing costs are high is because the law of supply and demand. And in a place like Australia, obviously, there is not enough housing being built to fulfill the needs of the population. If there was enough housing costs would be lower. Not only that, but you know what? They probably have the same issue that they have in more left-leaning places such as California, where they have so many laws, rules, and regulations that it drives up the cost to build new housing. Makes it extremely expensive. And so, you know what? The more expensive you make it to build, the less housing that's going to be built. That's just a fact, okay? You're going to have more people who say, you know what, it's just not worth it to develop new housing if we're going to have to jump through all these hoops. And so, yeah, they've got a real housing crisis going on down there. But like I've mentioned many times before, you can't blame the landlord for something that's the government's fault. You can't. It's the government's fault, and they created the issue. They need to cut regulations, not create more. That's the opposite of what they want to do. Every time there's a problem, where they're like, oh, well, housing costs are too high, they think that passing more laws is going to solve that problem. No, it's actually the opposite. We need to cancel a lot of the laws that you have already put into place. So before I get into this article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. So as a landlord, are you in agreement with this real estate agent who believes that you should never give a discount to a tenant? Okay. I would say it depends. It depends on a couple of things, right? First of all, maybe you have actually listed your property at above what the market rents are dictating, right? Well, you might have to discount that rent in order to get the unit rented. Okay, if you're trying to rent it for too much, you're not going to be able to get a tenant in there. So yeah, that's one thing, right? The other thing I would say is that if you have maybe a promotional deal where your first few months are discounted, and we're talking about for higher priced rents, that might be a good way to get a tenant locked into it, right? I mean, it really depends, but you got to be able to work the numbers well. But he brings up some good points when you're talking about doing the math and realizing that, hey, you just lost hundreds or maybe even thousands of dollars over the course of 1 year, okay? When you when you give a tenant a discount. And maybe he's talking about in terms of rent increases for existing tenants. So if you give an existing tenant, if you tell them, oh, I'm not going to raise your rent this year, yeah, you are giving up something that you definitely should not be giving up. Okay, so anyway, let's get into this article, see what it says. This article is coming from my least favorite source, the Daily Mail, and it says, real estate agent declares landlords should never give discounts to their tenants. And his reason why tells you more about him than you would like to know. Yeah. The Daily Mail, the single website with the most advertisements ever. But anyway, let's get into the article. A real estate agent has been forced to apologize after using a crude analogy to argue landlords should never give discounts to tenants. Trevor Pickens, who works for Quinta Real Estate in the eastern Melbourne suburb of Vermont South, made the comments in a private Facebook group, Landlords Victoria. Mr. Pickens said that even offering a $10 discount below the market rate to a renter was the equivalent of giving them a $520 gift over the space of a year. Did you spend $520 on your wife the last time you gave her a gift, he asked. And yeah, he's adding it up. It makes perfect sense to me. 52 weeks a year, giving a tenant a $10 discount on the weekly rent, that's $520, right? And so the thing that I like to mention to people is that at least in terms of commercial real estate, your property's value is based upon the rental income. So when you give a tenant a discount on the rent, or if you don't raise the rent on a tenant every single year, guess what? You're actually cutting the value of the property. What you can sell it for, what you can refinance it for, etc. Not only that, but if you're talking about a place that has rent control, well, you might never be able to recover the amount that you decided not to increase the rent for, okay? So if you're in a rent control place, you basically are put into a position where you have to raise the rent every single year, or you're going to be facing losses going on into the future forever. So yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Now, is this the best thing for the tenants? No, of course not, right? But we're talking about raising the rent to the market rate. So you're not going to be able to find a place to rent for cheaper than that, no matter if you leave or not. I mean, at least an equivalent place. Now, of course, you will, if you can't afford the rent increase, if you're the tenant, you can't afford a rent increase, the option that you have is to move along, go somewhere else that you can't afford. Not to try to get the government to force the landlord to keep the rents low. That's dumb. Okay. Not to try to convince your landlord, you know what, you should take a loss on my behalf. Why? You wouldn't pay me extra on my behalf. So why should I help you out in any way? That's something I like to ask a lot of the times, right? Like we have these tenants and they're asking for special treatment from the landlord. And they're like, please, be kind-hearted to me. And it's like, well, would you reciprocate? Would you do the same for me? And the truth of the matter is, no, they wouldn't. They wouldn't do the same for you. They wouldn't, if you were financially struggling, they wouldn't pay you extra rent. No, they would just say, well, screw you. That's your problem. Well, I tend to feel the same way about them. Okay, screw you. If you can't afford it, that's your problem, not mine. Probably not. Well, if you give a renter a discount of $10 per week, that's how much you have given them. $20 per week is a gift of $1,040. You don't sleep with your renter, so make it market rent. I like that. Mr. Pickens told Daily Mail Australia on Saturday that following backlash, he has changed the comments and he apologized for any offense they may have caused. I do see some people might have been offended by that, he said. He said his analogy was purely meant to do the math and illustrate the sum a weekly discount of $10 amounted to over the course of a year. And yeah, he's absolutely right, though. You know what? Simply put, I mean, it stuck out in people's minds, but when it comes down to it, this isn't about what's best for the tenant. It's about what's best for you as the landlord, okay? If you are struggling to pay your bills, it's not going to help if the tenant has a nice cheap place to live. That's why I'm like, listen, we're going to keep our rents at market or close to market rate always. We're going to continue to increase the rent because our costs continue to increase. And even if you have paid your property off, you should do this. I know so many landlords who own homes free and clear, and they're just like, I keep my rent low for the tenant because I feel bad for them. And my problem with this is that eventually the tenant is going to have to leave your property, and they're going to be confronted with the fact that, hey, I was getting a huge discount and now I can no longer, I don't even know how to budget for the actual market rates because they are so much higher than what I was paying before. So yeah, I mean, people should live in reality. They should live in reality. We should live in reality. We should base our rents on the market rates. They should be getting used to paying the market rate. And that's it, okay? Now, I'm not surprised people were offended by this. People hate landlords. I know this. So that's part of the reason I bring these sort of articles to you, because I think it's funny. I think it's funny that people go, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. Well, you know what? That's what a lot of us are out there thinking. Okay, I've talked to so many landlords, and a lot of us, we have it's kind of a cynical way to view things, but and it's not like we want to hurt people intentionally, right? But here's the thing. We're operating a business here. We are not operating charities. And when it comes down to it, we are looking after our own best interest first, not the tenants. And that's the only way we can. The tenant is looking after their own best interest. They're not looking after ours. So why should we be looking at, you know what I mean? It's like, come on here. But anyway, interesting article. I'll put a link if you want to go to the Daily Mail's website. All the ads, pop-ups, and all that. If you're not bothered by them, and you can read this article.